The giant alien roared as his massive fist hit the steel floor. A heavy green fist, thick as a cargo block, missed its mark by an inch. Dust shook from the ceiling lights of the obsidian octagon. The 9-foot champion spun on his triple-jointed hind legs, throwing a back fist that could split an armored bulkhead. His smaller opponent did not back away. She simply stepped inside the arc of the swing, moving close enough to touch his chest plates. No warnings, no rules, no escape. Would you face a titan with nothing but a flask? You will want to hear how this ends. 3 hours before the arena lights hummed to life, Zalevok stood in the center of the station betting common room. The air smelled of fried grease and cheap cooling fluid. He raised his 4 thick arms, flexing the obsidian-colored shell plates that covered his torso. His 52 consecutive victory badges jingled against his collar. He looked down at the crowd of smaller traders, miners, and mechanics who filled the common room of Nexus Station Tiberia. They were weak. They were soft. They were creatures born on worlds with gentle suns and thin air. Is this the best the mercantile hub can offer? Zalevok bellowed. His deep voice rattled the plastic cups on the tables. 52 fighters have crawled into the ring with me. 52 have left on stretchers. I am looking for a real challenge to mark my final match before I leave this sector. Are you all cowards, or is there one among you with the courage to face a true warrior? Near the back of the room, a multi-eyed Ophidian maintenance chief named Krellis paused. He rubbed his scale-covered snout with an oily rag, his lower hands twitching with anxiety. He looked at the giant champion, then leaned toward a small human security officer sitting on a nearby crate. He does not know, Krellis hissed in a low, wet whisper. He thinks the exhibition circuit rules are the law of the cosmos. Someone should tell him before he makes a terrible mistake. The security officer did not look up. Officer Alara Vance was 5 feet tall, wearing a standard blue uniform jacket and heavily scuffed gray gravity boots. A small metal badge sat crooked on her lapel. Instead of checking her sidearm, she was casually holding a dented, metallic thermal beverage flask. She unscrewed the top, took a slow sip of hot tea, and wiped her mouth with the back of her sleeve. She looked like a clerk waiting for a delayed cargo transit shuttle. Let him talk, Krellis, Alara said. Her voice was flat, dry, and entirely unbothered. My shift ends in 20 minutes. I am not getting paid overtime to teach history lessons to tourists. Zalevok took 3 booming steps toward her table. His heavy digitigrade feet dented the floor plating. He pointed his primary claw straight at her chest badge. You, small guard, you represent the laws of this station. Your people claim to run this sector, yet you hide behind steel walls and automated turrets. Would you like to show these people how a human fights? The room went dead silent. The syndicates were already updating the betting boards on their wrist screens. The odds against the human were shifting by the second. Alara looked down at her thermal flask, then up at the 9-foot mountain of muscle and shell. She sighed, a long, tired sound that seemed to drain the energy right out of her small frame. Look, big guy, you are native to a garden world with half of Sol's baseline gravity. Your shell is impressive, but it evolved to protect you from falling tree branches, not real kinetic impact. I am a master of the elite choreography, Zalevok snarled, his upper jaw clicking in rage. My strikes are mathematically perfect. That is exactly your problem, Alara muttered. She stood up, setting her scuffed boots firmly on the floor. She unclipped her heavy equipment belt and dropped it onto the crate with a loud clatter. You think combat is a dance with rules? My ancestors had to survive a world where the shadows had teeth and the gravity tried to crush your lungs every single day. I will take your match, but only if we do it right now so I can go home. 2 hours later, the obsidian octagon was packed to the rafters. The energy barriers around the ring hummed with a sharp, static charge that tasted like copper on the tongue. The crowd cheered, a wild wall of noise, but Zalevok barely heard them. He stood in the center of the ring, bouncing on his triple-jointed legs, waiting for the slaughter. Across the ring, Alara Vance stood in her standard blue pants and a plain gray undershirt. She looked tiny. She did not wear defensive chest plates, helmet, or kinetic gloves. Right before the referee drone raised its signal light, she reached down and slowly adjusted the small Velcro strap on her left wrist glove, tightening it with a soft rip. The drone flashed green. The match began. Zalevok did not wait. He executed his famous cyclone kick, a blinding spin that used his massive reach to control the space. The air displacement whipped across the ring, a small gale that ruffled Alara's short brown hair, but her body was already gone. She swayed back a single inch, letting the heavy foot pass her throat by the width of a fingernail. Her binocular vision tracked his fast-twitch muscles before his foot even left the ground. Frustrated by the miss, the champion brought his upper right claw down in a heavy vertical cleave meant to split her skull. Alara did not run away. She stepped forward, slipping past his guard, and tapped the lower center of his chest armor with her open palm. A short, sharp crack echoed through the arena. The localized kinetic shock traveled straight through his brittle shell, bypassing his outer armor entirely. The giant dropped to one knee, a sudden gasp ripping from his throat as the air left his lungs. The crowd gasped. The betting screens flickered as millions of credits shifted in a fraction of a second. "Get up," Alara said, stepping back to give him room. Her hands were loose at her sides. "Your center of gravity is too high for this floor. If you keep swinging like that, you are going to break your own legs." Rage blinded the warlord. He scrambled to his feet, his triple-jointed limbs pumping as he threw a rapid sequence of straight jabs. He attacked with wild fury. Instead of fleeing, she stayed right in his shadow, dissecting his stance with tiny, precise movements. A micro-jab paralyzed his dominant shoulder muscle. A simple foot sweep collapsed his rear leg, sending him crashing into the dirt. "You can yield," Alara said, looking down at him. Her face remained completely neutral. "Your pride isn't worth a shattered carapace." Zaelvok did not listen. His ego overrode his survival instinct. He screamed a traditional war chant from his home world, pushing himself up on his 3 remaining functional limbs. He gathered every ounce of mass he possessed for one final, desperate charge. He lunged, he missed, he crashed. Alara didn't block the heavy charge. She simply caught his forward wrist, turned her hips with perfect leverage, and redirected his 900-pound momentum directly into the energy shield. The giant hit the humming barrier face first. The kinetic dampeners groaned, sparks showering from the overhead grid as the barrier flared a blinding white. The sound was like a crashing cargo shuttle. Zaelvok rebounded off the hard shield and fell flat on his back, his obsidian chest plates cracked down the center like a dropped mirror. The arena fell into a deathly silence. Nobody cheered, nobody moved. The synthetic referee drone hovered over the fallen giant, its red lights blinking rapidly as it scanned his vital signs before calling for an immediate medical evacuation crew. The station syndicates quietly erased Zaelvok's permanent record from the betting board, replacing his flawless streak with a single gray 0. The human officer didn't look at the crowd. She walked over to the crate, picked up her equipment belt, and slung it over her shoulder. She picked up her scuffed metal thermal flask, took a short sip, and walked out through the side tunnel before the medical team even reached the ring. The next morning, the lights in Sector 4 Medwing were low and sterile. Zaelvok lay on a reinforced hovercot, his upper body wrapped in thick medical foam. His chest ached with every breath. The arrogance that had carried him across 52 worlds was gone, replaced by a cold, heavy weight in his gut. A soft click sounded at the door. Alara Vance walked in, wearing her civilian clothes, a simple jacket and her old scuffed boots. She did not have a weapon and she did not look like a champion. She walked to the side of his bed and set her dented thermal flask on the metal side table. She unscrewed the lid, pouring a steaming, spiced vegetable broth into a small plastic cup. The sharp, savory scent filled the sterile room. "Your armor will heal in a few weeks," Alara said, handing him the cup. The medical droid said the fractures are clean. Zaelvok took the cup with his lower left claw, his movements slow and shaky. He looked at the broth, then up at her small hands. "You did not use weapons, you did not even use your full strength. Why?" Alara sat on the edge of a stool, leaning her elbows on her knees. "Because it wasn't a fight. You were playing a game for trophies. My people didn't build martial arts for sport, Zaelvok. We built them because our cradle world tried to kill us every day for 1,000,000 years. When you grow up in heavy gravity surrounded by apex predators, you don't fight to score points. You fight to end the threat as fast as possible so you can live to see the next sunrise." The giant alien took a sip of the warm broth, feeling the heat spread through his damaged chest. He looked at the scuffed metal flask on the table, realizing it was the same object she had held so carelessly before dismantling his entire life's work. He never stepped into the ring again. He stayed on the station, working the docks, watching the small humans carry heavy crates with quiet ease. The scuffed gray boots walked down the metal corridor, disappearing into the crowded morning shift.